I'm going to do a breakdown video. I haven't done these in a while, and this is from the 9/11 Commission. It's actually Tim Roemer is interviewing Richard Bonner from from Homeland Security Customs and Border, James Ziglar from Immigration and Naturalization Services. So let's see what's going on.
Okay. Commissioner Roemer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We are very late on time, so.
I realize that. I'll try to be very brief. I did want to follow up on one of the senator's points with respect to, with all due respect, it's not so much hindsight looking back for us as it is one of really the celebrated successes at the millennium of Customs and INS and Border Patrol working together to stop something from happening. Senator.
For those who don't know, we're not familiar. The Millennium Bomb Plot was a terrorist plot that involved the bombing of Los Angeles International Airport, Jewish neighborhoods on the border of Lebanon, in Jordan, the attacks on U.S. military installations as well, and it involved a number of different factions: Al Qaeda in Yemen, Islamist groups from Algeria. There was a couple of groups. There was also a group based in Jordan that involved one nefarious individual, which is Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who at that time was the leader of the Wal Jihad al-Tawhid group, which later became Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which later became the Islamic State and Levant. And this was a group that was formed by Mohammed al-Makdisi, who was basically a major league Islamist based in Jordan, that tutored or put under the wing of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who then went to Afghanistan and wanted to join Al-Qaeda, but bin Laden thought against it and gave him some money to open up a training camp, which later became this group that was formed in 1999, and then later, of course, under Iraq and Syria, became one of the largest terror groups in all of the Arabian Peninsula. The Millennium Plot was compromised when an individual by the name of Ahmed Rassam, who was involved with Al Qaeda and went to the Al Farouk training camp, was seen there by a future 9/11 operative who was supposed to be in the second wave of attacks, Zacharias Moussaoui. Ahmed Rassam was supposed to drive a car filled with explosives on the British Columbia border inside the United States and to drive it to Los Angeles International Airport and blow it up. And that involved, like I said, it was a multifaceted operation, and it was a big operation. This is actually really important because the Millennium Plot involved members of Al Qaeda, and how they got compromised was there was a phone call that was made. This was initially how it was compromised. I mean, Ahmed Rassam was just one part of the operation. How the operation came to be known was that there was a phone call by some fundamentalists to, I think, Abu Zubaydah about, the brothers are ready to attack, and the Jordan authorities overheard the phone call and warned the CIA and warned the United States, and a lot of people got arrested, with the exception of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who managed to escape. And so the attack in Jordan didn't happen. It was supposed to bomb the Radisson Hotel and Jewish neighborhoods and whatnot, attack Jews as well, and of course the bomb that was driven by Ahmed Rassam, but that was only because of one alert border security guard named Diana Dean. And she basically saw that there was this car that they wanted to look out for. And then they told Ahmed Rassam to open up the back seat of the car. I mean, the hatch in the back. because she saw that he was acting a little bit suspicious, evading questions and whatnot initially. And because of this alert border security guards, this one woman saved an attack on LAX. One woman.
Kerry mentioned
By the way, when I pause
the turning point being Africa in 1998 and the bombings there. Well, certainly in the millennium, we have terrorists targeting our domestic homeland, and more specifically, the Los Angeles airport. Rassam is trying to get across the border, up on the northwest border, and you have a celebrated success at the millennium.
A lot of people tend to basically concentrate south of the border, Mexico. All the like 90% of the attention is always to the south. Nobody talks about north of the border, especially when it comes to radical Islamist groups like Al Qaeda. All right, there's a theory. Myself and my co-researcher, DJ Thermodetonator, who does just magnificent work. I consider him the best in the business. Regarding the lapse or the lack thereof of security north of the country, and how Islamist groups come from, say, Europe or the Arabian Peninsula, and then fly into Canada, and then travel southward into the United States. Regarding, we think there's a theory that we're working on that. Why did Muhammad Atta and Abdulaziz Al-Mahri go to Portland? It didn't make sense. Even the 9/11 Commission basically references, we don't know why they went there. Well, we think they went there to meet with the second wave of the attacks, of the 9/11 attacks, something that is basically not covered anywhere. TMZ covered it later, but we were on this years prior. Very few people were, like Paul Thompson. Right? And the Joint Inquiry 9/11 Commission knows about these second wave of attacks because they reported on it. Bob Graham, the co-chair of the Joint Inquiry, would later say that, yes, we knew about additional planes that were going to be hijacked. Why wasn't this, common news? Why? Because they didn't want to hurt the airline industry, which is a, multi-$100 million industry, which would probably destroy the economy, which was the whole idea of the Bajinka plot, which would have been 10 times worse than 9/11. Nevertheless, and that was the idea put forth by bin Laden, they wanted to hurt the economy of the United States. Nevertheless, Islamist groups would travel south into the country. And, why would Muhammad Atta go to Portland and Abdullah and barely just get back and compromise the biggest operation Al Qaeda ever constructed? Was it to basically, the 9/11 Commission would basically say that they didn't want to be caught, all in one area in the Logan airport to raise suspicion, which is ridiculous, right? In its own merit. They went up there, most likely, again, speculation, most likely to meet with other operatives and tell them about, how are you guys doing and whatnot. The FBI finds a list of names in the car that was left in O'Hare. And that wasn't released to the public. Who's on those names? All the people that were involved. How many of them? Well, it was longer than 19. So when you have, even today, current times, you have Islamist groups based in Canada that have connections in the Arabian Peninsula that coordinate with one another. And nobody talks about this. Canadian border security. Ali Mohammed, remember Ali Mohammed? The triple agent for the CIA, the FBI, and Al Qaeda, or bin Laden, right? Here's the guy that basically came inside the United States through Canada. Was caught on the Canadian border with another individual. I forgot his name. Al Harvey or something like that, right? They know this guy's a triple agent. So he makes a phone call because border security in Canada detained, his friend. They called the United States. Ali Mohammed calls somebody. They let him through. It's not Mexico, folks. North of the border. That's the key. It's in a Millennium Plot, part of 9/11, and God knows what else. Even currently, everyone's focused on Tijuana, the border into the United States. Nobody's focused on British fucking Columbia, Vancouver, Ontario, because nobody's paying attention. That's how they're coming in here. I mean, if I'm correct, and the Islamists from Afghanistan or in Israel want to attack the United States for giving weapons to the Israelis who are using them on defenseless Arabs, well, I'm going to come into your country the safest way possible. It's not going to be coming from Mexico. It's coming from north of the border.
You have something that has been widely reported in the media where an agent is doing her job diligently and with some serendipity discovers what she seems to think might be some drug problems, and with some combined skills from some other people, they look in the trunk, they find bomb material, and we catch somebody that might be coming at us to bomb the LA airport. Now, we're not talking about, specifically airlines as we were in the Bojinka plot. We are talking about a domestic threat that happened in 1993 at the World Trade Center, which they came back to. That happened outside Langley, where there was a shooting. That happened in the Landmarks case in New York, where terrorists wanted.
All right, Tim Roemer, fuck yeah. All right. For those who are saying, oh, the 9/11 commission, some of these commissioners, they get it. They're looking at the information and making that, oh, wait a minute. There's a connection between the 93 World Trade Center bombing, the shooting at CIA Langley, the embassy bombings, Bojinka, 9/11. Oh, right? Fuck yeah, Tim. High five. High fucking five. One of the few that get it, just like Carl Levin at Joint Inquiry. Asking the right questions.
To bomb some of our most historic sites up in New York City.
Landmark.
Why? It's not.
But that's one of the few people who mentions it. It also, there you go. The El Said Noser. The PLO. We're going back. Abu Nidal. Oh, God damn it. Yes. The tying into the foreign intelligence services monitoring these groups abroad that come here and then start operations here, which are then, monitored by domestic and foreign intelligence. And he's tying it all the way to the top, the beginning. Oh, man, this is fucking fantastic. Finally. Because it shows the conspiracy of what could be, right? That the intelligence services might know something about operations and that they allow these operations because of their own idiocy or their unwillingness to work with other agencies. And more nefariously, maybe, that they wanted these attacks to happen, to carry out a successful foreign policy plan by nefarious individuals within the foreign and domestic governments, the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, most notably. And this is the first time I'm seeing a congressional member of the inquiries involving the 9/11 attacks get to that point, that close point that I've been begging people to concentrate on, which is terrorist operatives who come from abroad, that come to the United States and are shadowed by the intelligence services. And, some of the plots are uncovered and some are not. And the ones that are not, why did it fail? And you have inquiries like this that don't ask the right questions. And here you have Tim Roemer getting so fucking close to how groups like Abu Nidal and Bin Laden and Islamic State, why they attacked us, for what reason, and where was intelligence in all this? If the attacks were successful, why were they failures to begin with, right? Asking the right questions. This is the fucking crux of it. This is it.
Hindsight, why is it? Why is it that we aren't more focused from outside inward to the domestic threat?
Well, we definitely are more focused now. I mean, the question is,
No, I'm talking about why on September the 11th.
9/11?
Why aren't we more focused now?
And look, I'm, as you know, very much aware of, as a Customs Inspector, Diana Dean, who was questioning Ahmad Rassam. Ahmad Rassam was not only an Algerian national in Canada illegally, but he had gone to terrorist training camps run by Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. He was to link up with some Al Qaeda terrorists in the United States to assist them to carry out the bombing attack on Los Angeles International Airport. So yeah, it's one inspector, cold hit, by the way, just like Inspector Melendez, cold hit by Inspector Dean. No advance information, just doing her job. So it is important, by the way, to have well-trained people.
What about a customs agent in Florida, Melendez? I forgot his name was Bob Melendez or something like that, where he turned away an individual named Muhammad Al-Qahtani, the alleged 20th hijacker, another 20th hijacker, right? Like Zacharias Moussaoui. But this guy basically was dropped off. No, he actually landed in the country from Saudi Arabia and was going to meet Muhammad Atta. And it just so happened in the parking lot of Florida was a car belonging to an individual who owned the car, and his name was Muhammad Atta. So this guy would have been part of what? The operations of 9/11. What part? Right? If Al-Qahtani is a 20th hijacker, was he supposed to be involved with the second wave of attacks? I mean, we don't ask these right questions, right? You know, who are these individuals from Texas that, were, had like, hair dye and knives and whatnot. You had an individual in Canada that was celebrating the attacks on the plane. I forgot his name. You had a number of operatives that were inside the fucking United States and also, getting out of the country and entering the country that had ties to these Al Qaeda operatives that were involved with 9/11 at some level. So you're asking, like, who are these people? They're not just financiers. They're part of the operation because, we turned away Al-Qahtani. And he actually was arrested by authorities there, and, he gets tortured or whatnot. But still, that's who Melendez was. They turned away this guy because he couldn't tell Melendez, the customs agent, he couldn't tell him where he was going, who he was meeting. He had no money and barely spoke fucking English.
Doing their job. We obviously want to be able to give them more information in terms of who it is they need to look at, what they need to look at, to improve our chances of preventing terrorists from entering our country to carry out attacks. So I don't, by the way, when I said hindsight, I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, the 9/11 Commission is doing exactly what it should be doing, looking at this and trying to figure out what we could have done better and what we need to do better and what we are doing better. But so I don't mean to, please don't interpret that as critical whatsoever.
Oh, no, Senator Kerry's gone. You can say anything you want about him now.
Would you tell Senator Kerry?
All right, it's interesting that they bring this up because I know exactly what they're talking about. Now, look, the critique of immigration and Homeland Security, right, was that they didn't look inward. They were concentrating outward, just like the FAA, right? I always play this clip, and this is what they're referring to. This is a clip of Bob Kerry interviewing Monty Belger, the acting director of the FAA at the time. And Bob Kerry asks Monty Belger, why did the FAA not, have stricter security measures and, or alerts regarding, say, cockpit on every international domestic airline? Why wasn't this? Because it was known in 95 about the Pachinko plot, the threat to the airline industry. And just watch this exchange, because this is one of the most important exchanges in all of the inquiries, joint inquiry, 9/11 inquiry. This is huge, right?
We knew by then that bin Laden was going to come after the United States. So what did the guy report when he came back in 1995? What did he tell you? And what was your response to it?
Well, my recollection, and I do not have specific recollection of what was said, but my general recollection was that the threat at that time, and continued up through September 11, was really directed outside the borders of the United States.
In 1998, after the East African Embassy bombing, Mr. Belger, it was in the newspaper that the United States of America federal government arrested 2 suspects that were in the United States. One in California, one in Texas.
Ali Muhammad and Wadi al-Haq.
Why would you reach that conclusion, that they were only going to attack outside the United States?
The conclusion I reached, sir, was based on the intelligence information that was given to me. I mean, I can't be any more...
I'm talking about stuff that's
clear.
reported in the newspaper. It doesn't come from...
Right, so that's really huge, because Bob Kerry is freaking correct in that. Why wasn't the FAA more concentrated on, what was happening outside the country rather than inside the country? Why aren't immigration? I've been saying this for years. Why didn't INS, Immigration Naturalization Service? Why didn't the FAA? Why didn't Homeland Security? Why didn't, the Department of Justice? These federal agencies start looking inward instead of starting outward, right? Because the terrorists are outside the country, but the threats are coming from inside the country. And that's only because of the limited information that was shared between the agencies, and also the simple fact that we're not prepared for terrorists inside the country, and therefore we don't train local, much less local or city agencies, the federal agencies, about being aware about the threats inside the country. It wasn't until the 9/11 attacks where they started, breaking down the walls, so to speak, so that agencies from local, federal, and state can share information with one another without having to go through bureaucracy and getting it, approved to share this information. But we're doing the same things over again. And this is what Tim Roemer's basically inquiring on.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see how you continue to answer these questions. On training side, you said that these agents did their job without advanced knowledge on the border to get Rassam. Great example of fortune and training and skill and some education and combination of resources coming together to catch this person.
Well, yes, but also too, Rassam was making it like almost known that, hey, I'm looking like a really suspicious individual. For one, he was sweating, so to speak, and I would be too if I was, I had a truck full of fucking C4 explosives and whatnot, and chemical compounds, right, hidden in the fucking wheel of the tire, and the spare tire in the trunk, right. And also at the same time, he knows that this is a martyrdom operation. He's going to go there, drive, and blow it up right outside, the airport. And secondly, like he has limited English. He doesn't know, his vocabulary was very limited according to with the English language. So, like, that's another thing. Like, Bin Laden, some of these selections were just head scratchers, right? Even with the 93 World Trade Center bombing. I spoke with my great co-researcher and co-host of the Dark and Now, Richard Cox, about this recently. Why did Ramzi Youssef have Mohammed Saleh anywhere near this operation? It was a freaking retard. Even Ramzi Youssef, they asked Ramzi Youssef, why did Saleh go back and get his deposit? If he escapes, we don't catch any of you. And Ramzi Youssef, first of all, he goes, stupid. Well, if the motherfucker's stupid, why involve him with such an operation? Like, why? Why not give the guy a few fucking bucks to get out of the fucking country? Right? What does Bin Laden do? The first 2 people he selects, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, don't speak English. He brings them to the United States to speak English because they were supposed to be the pilots for Flight 77. People tend to forget this. Well, what these fucking guys do, they go out to parties, they fucking, drink, right? They don't go to English classes because they don't fucking pay attention. And Khalid al-Mihdhar leaves for Yemen for the birth of his the birth of his son in Yemen, and leaves Nawaf al-Hazmi behind alone. It's just like, wow, these people are fucking, why would you send somebody so dumb? But then at the same time, like, educated Islamists like Muhammad Atta, Ziad Jarrah, Mohammed al-Shahid, they come to the United States. They're, they speak English. They are educated, right? in the same fashion like Ramzi Youssef. He's an educated man, University of Swansea, electrical engineering, all this, right? But then they're mixed with these dumb idiots that could compromise these plots. It's interesting to know.
But we also need strategic and tactical information to give them advance warning about our borders. There are reports that al-Qaeda cells still exist in the United States or up in Canada. Where are you getting, Commissioner, your strategic and tactical intelligence now? Apparently it's not from the CIA.
Well, every day, actually, before March 1 of 2003, actually, every day, or virtually every working day, I did get an intelligence briefing in the morning by the CIA.
Up until when?
Up until the formation of the Department of Homeland Security.
Till March?
And now, on March 1 of this year. So, and now I am getting intelligence information. We have an Office of Intelligence within Customs now, Customs and Border Protection. So we get all of the classified cables come into our SCIF, and they are reviewed by our people in terms of one question: is this going to be helpful to the frontline inspectors at the borders to have this information?
Are these new?
Now,
Excuse
by the
me.
way,
Let me just ask a
go
quick
ahead.
question. Are these newly hired people, or are they, as I've experienced with the briefings from the CIA, you have some of the most experienced people at CIA with decades of experience? You don't have those briefings anymore as of March 1.
Well,
do you have the new hired and the inexperienced people giving you these briefs now?
That was just me personally getting briefings.
No, I'm just curious
which is important,
as to
by the
how
way,
we're
but-
formulating the people that are coming to give us the tactical
by and
and
large,
strategic intelligence.
this is a small cadre of intelligence analysts that we had at U.S. Customs. It's smaller now because there was a break-off of Customs, but it's a small cadre of intelligence analysts that have the highest level of clearances, including SCI clearances, and they are looking at, this is just one of the mechanisms.
Yeah, but this is a new department. Where are they from? Are they detailed from another agency?
These are
See, what he's talking about here, Ziegler, is basically the how intelligence is shared with the federal agencies, right? So there's we have what they call the National Intelligence Program, which is run by the Director of National Intelligence, or ODNIN, right? Which he serves as the head of the U.S. intelligence community, and they oversee the directing of sharing intelligence between the agencies, the Homeland Security Department, Customs and INS, the FBI, and down to local and state law agencies, right? So this is like how it should have been. If we were looking inward, and the Director of National Intelligence, gets help from the CIA, which is a foreign liaison community agency. Well, they're not getting their information from them, right? They're getting their information from who? Department of Justice, Customs, INS, federal agencies, domestic, and they coordinate with one another. And then they have briefings. That's what Ziegler was talking about. They have briefings and meetings and whatnot. This is why the CIA didn't share information with INS. And later on, like they'll do it sometimes, but not not all the time. I don't know why. But
no, these are people. The people that are looking at the classified cables are U.S. Customs and Border Protection intelligence analysts.
Why it's important, by the way, I forgot to mention this, is because the National Intelligence Program answers to the President of the United States, State Department. Okay, they get the information about like say a threat matrix report drafted by, I don't know, say the FBI. It goes through the agencies because, like, say they go, there's a threat in Oklahoma, there's a threat in Florida, right? And then they talk about it. They share intelligence. All right, let's inform, Florida, police and Miami-Dade or whatever and whatnot. Share this intelligence, but it has to go through the proper channels, the wall and stuff like that. It would take weeks, sometimes even months, to get it approved, to see what type of intelligence. Is it personal intelligence? Is it actionable intelligence? Is it a criminal Is it for criminal prosecution, or is it for, just general information to be on the lookout? And then that has to get approved. But without the wall there, right? Boom. Now there's no wall. We don't need to get it approved. If we think the person's suspicious and, we're going to involve federal, local, state, all acting as one unit and share this information, no matter if the person's like innocent and his, information is private, it doesn't matter no more. We don't need a fucking warrant anymore. And that, there's a pro and con to all this.
As part of our Office of Intelligence. It's not the only source where we get information. I just want you to know there are about 800 classified cables a day. We look at them. Does it have any information, not just tactically, but strategically important to the border and border security? Now, if it does, as I think you know, under the rules, we have to go back, as we do, to the originating source to declassify that so we can put out an appropriate alert or information to the field, and that's what we do. That's why we have that note there. We are also getting information from the Information Analysis Infrastructure, can't say it, IAIP, Information Analysis Infrastructure Protection Directorate of the Department of Homeland Security, which is drawing, we put our collection requirements up to, I'm going to call it IA, and it puts them to the intel community. And we are actually pulling valuable information down that is relevant and related to border security through IAIP as a unit within the new Department of Homeland Security. You've already heard testimony today on the TTEC, which is now stood up, I believe, and also the Terrorist Screening Center, which is to actually develop one master terrorist watch list for our government and the like. So it's not that we're just getting it from one place. And I still, by the way, I do get a weekly briefing, typically, from the CIA, and I also get another briefing once or twice a week from our own Office of Intelligence myself, just to make sure that we understand as best we can everything that's relevant, and that we are then tasking operationally intelligence-driven special operations to all the ports of entry in the United States, all the customs and immigration, legacy customs and immigration inspectors are now CBP officers, and to the Border Patrol.
Okay, this is really important, right? Because it relates to terrorist events. For example, I'll use a good example, Phoenix memo, okay? This was a memo that was drafted by an FBI agent out of Arizona named Ken Williams. I've interviewed him. And it was based on the Phoenix memo and his informant inside these Islamist groups that were in Scottsdale, Arizona, in Phoenix, because Phoenix, Arizona is home to most of the flight schools in the country, right? So through his informant, they found out that there was Islamist groups trying to fly planes, trying to train at these flight schools to use planes as weapons inside the United States, right? So he drafted this memo, a year prior to 9/11. And it was an information-only cable. It wasn't actually it wasn't a criminal cable, right? And it wasn't for a criminal prosecution case. So it was only fact to say certain individuals within the counterterrorism center of the FBI, people like Dave Frasca in Minnesota, John O'Neill in New York, certain individuals. Not everybody saw this cable. And when they did see the cable come in, they saw it as information only, and that, it wasn't pertinent, but it was. And at the same time, because it wasn't pertinent, they didn't act on it. The president didn't even know about this memo until, a year after 9/11. Can you fucking believe that? Not only that, it showed that there was a threat to U.S. airliners regarding Islamic militants inside the country that are not just necessarily Al-Qaeda. So the one individual that was focused on his name was Zachariah Subra. He wasn't Al-Qaeda, but he was this, he had pictures of bin Laden and I think there was another militant on his wall, like fucking blaring. He hates America. And when Ken Williams went to interview him, this guy said, we gotta fucking watch this guy. This guy's a direct, like this guy said, I don't care. I hope, Pan Am 103 happens again. He's talking about like fucking attacking the United States with airplanes. And they're like, we gotta fucking watch this guy. Meanwhile, he gets pulled off, Ken Williams, and there's a threat. There's an arsonist that was in Arizona, and so they didn't, they pulled him out of the counterterrorism center, or counterterrorism unit in Arizona. And when he gets back, then because he has this draft, the Phoenix memo. When he gets back, I think it's released in June of 2001 or whatever, but it doesn't get read on, or nobody catches on until after 9/11. So by then it's too late. So here's a great example of information that comes in that is basically either, like he says, as Ziglar says, there's so many cables that come in, we don't know which is important or not. And here's one prime example of it. Here's an information only cable. It basically talks about, a terrorist threat to airliners. Nobody reads it because it's just like, all right, it may not be, so what? There's a threat to airline industry. We don't have, enough information, regarding, a concentration on the airline industry, but there was. And it started back in 95 with the Bajinka plot, right? That's why I said there's a, direct correlation between all these terrorist events, right? And here's a perfect example of one piece of information that was seen as just, something that we can, dismiss, but it was fucking truly important. And you wonder why, we had a failure of communication of acting on intelligence that could have prevented 9/11. And in this case, you could go either way. You could say that there was malfeasance within the FBI, or that there was a level of just ignorance regarding how radical Islamists operate. But the overwhelming threat to the airline industry was there. Bin Laden made it fucking. You know what the real conspiracy is? It wasn't a secret. There was a direct threat to the airline industry starting back in 95, and that Bin Laden wanted to attack the United States. Put two and two together, right? That's all you have to do. And there were some FBI agents that tried to blow the fucking horn. Ken Williams was one, Mark Rossini's another, Harry Samet, Pauline Rowley, I've interviewed some of these people. So, and nobody either, they were ignored, or they were, almost sanctioned by their own fucking agents.
What we just continue to be very worried about is that we have these great experienced people out at CIA and new people, new hires, less experienced people coming into new slots and new requirements at TTIC and Department of Homeland Security, and that will be a task-up problem and a training problem, and something that I'm sure, Commissioner Bonner, you're experiencing. The day has been very long. We've had a great a series of panels, and you've been very helpful. Let me conclude with just one last question to Mr. Ziglar. According to our staff, let me just read you a couple sentences. Here's what might happen at our port of entry today. Today at ports of entry, inspectors swipe machine-readable passports when they are presented. The computer then prompts the inspector to enter the visa type. The computer tells the inspector to give the B1, B2 applicant 6 months. 6 months to stay. The hijacker, Walid al-Shari, for instance, only requested 20 days, but was given automatically by the computer 6 months. Do you think that there should be an automatic designated length of stay for people coming into this country when they're requesting significantly less than that? And why aren't we addressing this?
Congressman, I actually addressed that in my opening statement. In fact, I propose that we have a 30-day default period when there was ambiguity about how long somebody wanted to stay, and that we operate on the basis of you come in, you say, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks, and here's my itinerary, and we give you 2 weeks, or we give you 3 weeks, or we give you some reasonable period of time. as opposed to just by default giving you 6 months. My view was that 6 months, number one, encourages overstays. They get here, they like it, they find a boyfriend or girlfriend, all these things happen. Secondly, it certainly gives a lot of time for evil folks to come in here and do their thing really undetected. And so I thought, my view was that if we're going to have an entry-exit system that will record the comings and goings, and we have this 30-day default period, or we know why you're here and how long you're going to be here, that we can match those things up a whole lot better, and not just for terrorism, though, Congressman, for better control of our borders and better enforcement of our immigration laws. Because, not everybody who comes across the border is a terrorist, but there are people who come across the border with the intent of staying here because they like it. And one of the biggest problems we got are illegal aliens in the country. 40% of those are overstays. And it seems to me that we can deal with that problem by not having such a wide open default period of 6 months. That was my view. We published a notice of proposed regulations, and boy, did the storm start.
Well, here, look, let me add to this too. That wasn't the primary problem regarding 9/11. The primary problem regarding 9/11 and how these operatives got in the country was through a Visa Express program, which was a program implemented by the Department of State that had wanted to bring stronger relations to Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, because at that time, the Khobar Towers attacks, the threat of Islamic radicalization of Arab Muslims, it was coming from Saudi Arabia, okay? It was not a secret. So the United States wanted to build upon their relations with Saudi Arabia to regulate the oil market and tourism industry, and just selling of weapons to a country that, buys more weapons from the United States than any other country on the face of the earth. Okay, you don't want to ruin this money-making, ally, by the way, right? So what do? All right, we're going to implement a program that fast tracks, individuals that are coming from just Saudi Arabia to the United States. And so they implemented the program through the Jeddah U.S. Consular Office, right, and Riyadh Consular Office as well, in regards to how they fast-track individuals. So in other words, like one of the hijackers, what he spoke about, Walid al-Shadi. Walid al-Shadi, applicants usually go through this. They get an application, right? They fill out this application. Who are they going to see? How much money they have? What type of job do you have? Do you plan on working here? Do you plan on studying here? For how long? And because there are different kind of visas. There's a work visa, there's a student visa, B1, B2, and all this, right? So he has to fill out these but according to the testimony of Shea Steiger and those at the Jeddah Consular Office, they were so overwhelmed with applicants that a lot of these applications that basically didn't fill out a lot of these questions. And when it came to the night, like a lot of these muscle hijackers, they didn't even put down who they were meeting. They didn't put down how much money they had. They barely even wrote in the application itself. Some of them were fucking blank for the exception of their names. And because of this fucking program, they were fast-tracked. In other words, they don't have to have a face-to-face meeting because when you fill out an application, it's reviewed by an agent from Customs, say in Jeddah, and then they look at the application. All right, we want to know more, so we're going to have a face-to-face meeting, right? So they invite the person to come down and ask them additional questions. This is how the regular procedure goes. And then from there, there's either a second review or that they're approved. And then when they're approved, they have to go through a green screening, whatnot, and background check. All this didn't happen. Visa Express program said, fill out application, come right through. You're approved. And then, through immigration, they scanned their visa. And in all these cases, they get right in. That's the fucking problem. And did they mention this? Barely at the 9/11.
Mr. Ziglar, it's been a long day, but not so long that I didn't listen to your very opening statement. I heard you say that you proposed it. Congress hasn't listened. We haven't done anything about that. How can we make your proposal effective?
Congressman, Congress doesn't have to do anything about that.
So how do we get it by the executive branch or
Well,
by
you
a commissioner
got
or
it.
somebody? How do we accomplish what you sought out to try to achieve?
Well, you've got to convince the executive branch to do it, and then you've got to convince the executive branch not to bend when Congress threatens them with the ability to cut off money or to do all the things that Congress can do to the executive branch. This does not require legislation. This is a regulation function.
Yeah, he's right. And look, I'll end it right there. So what did the State Department do? What did the Bush White House do? Right? Well, they said, well, fuck all these independent security agencies and airports. We're going to implement a federal one. The TSA, right? Transportation Security Agency. And so they create this agency, which it turns out, there was an audit about in 2004, I want to say 2005, where they tested the security, the security apparatus of the TSA and found out that it was no better than the individual security companies that were screening and for bombs and weapons and whatnot. In fact, there was a CNN article back in 2005. I want to say I don't quote me on this, but it was 2005 or 2004 where it was regarding this audit, the security audit of the TSA, and they found that there was agents that basically had not even a high school diploma working in this field. Can you imagine having some fucking 20-year-old and then training him to look for, suspicious individuals within these terrorist groups? They don't know shit about Cheyenola, less than fucking, how to screen individuals that are coming from Pakistan or Saudi Arabia. What do they look like? To them, they don't know what a fucking terrorist looks like because they don't even know what a hamburger looks like, right? It's just like, oh my God. All right, whatever. That's the end of the video, man. Listen, have a great weekend. I'll see you next video, everybody. Take care.